Could you please support my channel by subscribing? Deep in the countryside of a quiet town, there lived a man whom many considered a recluse. He was old, his body showing signs of the wear that comes with age, but his mind was as sharp as ever. A retired soldier, his once strong hands were now calloused and weathered from years of repairing things: old cars, broken radios, and anything else he could find in his workshop. This man, named Gerald, had a passion that was less known by those around him. It was not merely his skill with tools and machines, but an insatiable curiosity for mechanical technology and innovation. For decades, Gerald had quietly lived in his small, cluttered home, keeping to himself. His life was simple routine, even. He would rise at dawn, work in his garage until sunset, and retreat to his small, dimly lit living room where he would occasionally watch television before bed. But for the past few weeks, something strange had been happening. Gerald had been having dreams so vivid that they left him feeling uneasy when he awoke, as though they were more than just figments of his imagination. In the first dream, Gerald found himself standing in the middle of a vast field under a night sky filled with stars. Everything around him was calm and serene. Then suddenly the stars seemed to shift, and from the sky descended a strange object. It was a UFO, shiny, metallic, and otherworldly in its design. Its curved shape, its seamless exterior, and the faint hum it emitted all felt real, as if he could reach out and touch it. He stood frozen, watching in awe as the craft hovered just above the ground before gently landing. When Gerald awoke the next morning, the dream stayed with him. He couldn't shake the image of the UFO. It wasn't just the craft itself that captivated him, but the level of detail in its design. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like something he could build. Gerald was no stranger to invention. In his youth, he had designed simple machines, and his love for mechanics had never faded. But this dream, this UFO, it was something beyond anything he had ever conceived of before. That night, the dream came again, but this time it was different. The same field, the same night sky, and the same UFO descended from the stars. But now Gerald was no longer alone. Standing next to the craft was a figure, a woman, but not human. Her skin was a pale, translucent blue, and her large eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. She was dressed in strange, ethereal garments, and there was an air of desperation about her. "Help me," she said, her voice soft but filled with urgency. Gerald didn't understand what was happening. He felt confused, as though the line between dream and reality had been blurred. The alien woman continued to speak, though her words were unlike anything he had ever heard. Yet somehow, he understood her. She told him that she was being held captive, trapped in a dark prison by a powerful alien warlord. She showed him visions of her cell, a cold, metallic dungeon on a distant planet, guarded by soldiers and protected by high-tech security systems. "You can save me," she whispered. "You must build the ship." When Gerald awoke again, he was drenched in sweat. His heart raced as if he had just lived through the events in his dream. But what was even more unsettling was the clarity of the dream's details. The alien woman's voice echoed in his mind, and he remembered every part of the UFO: the shape, the design, the components. It was as if she had implanted the knowledge into his mind. Gerald couldn't ignore it any longer. There was something about these dreams that felt real, as though they were more than mere figments of his subconscious. He had to build the UFO. He had to see if it was possible. For days, Gerald toiled in his workshop, gathering materials and sketching out plans. Every night, the dream returned, and the alien woman whom he now knew as Zara gave him more information, guiding him step by step through the process of building the ship. She described the inner workings of the craft, the propulsion system, the power source, and the intricate controls. Gerald followed her instructions meticulously, knowing that each part was essential to the ship's functionality. The work was slow and painstaking. Gerald had never built anything like this before, and there were moments when he doubted himself. But Zara's voice always returned in his dreams, encouraging him, urging him to continue. The more he worked, the more he realized that this was no ordinary UFO. The technology was far beyond anything that existed on Earth. It was alien, advanced, and powerful. Weeks turned into months, and finally, after countless hours of labor, the UFO was complete. Gerald stood back and marveled at the craft before him. It was beautiful in its simplicity, yet complex beyond his wildest imagination. He had done it. He had built the ship from his dreams. But now came the true test. Would it actually work? With trembling hands, Gerald climbed into the cockpit. The interior of the craft was just as Zara had described, and as he powered it up, the controls came to life. The ship emitted a low hum, and the lights flickered on. For a moment, Gerald hesitated. Could he really fly this thing? He had never been in space before, let alone piloted a UFO. But there was no turning back now. He had to know. As he activated the ship's propulsion system, the craft lifted off the ground effortlessly. The feeling was exhilarating, like nothing he had ever experienced. Gerald navigated the ship out of his workshop and into the open sky, climbing higher and higher until the stars enveloped him. He was in space. The journey to Zara's planet was long, but the ship's advanced technology made the trip faster than any human spacecraft could manage. Guided by the coordinates Zara had given him in his dreams, Gerald eventually arrived at the desolate planet where she was being held captive. It was a bleak, barren world, and in the distance he could see the fortress, a massive, labyrinthine structure that housed Zara's prison. But the fortress was heavily guarded. Alien soldiers patrolled the perimeter, armed with advanced weaponry, and the place was riddled with traps designed to keep intruders out. Gerald knew this wouldn't be easy, but he wasn't just an old man with a love for machines. He was a retired soldier, trained in infiltration and combat. He landed the UFO a safe distance away and set out on foot toward the fortress. Using his military training, he moved stealthily, avoiding detection as he approached the entrance. One by one, he took out the alien guards, disabling them with precision and efficiency. The fortress was vast and confusing, a maze of corridors and rooms filled with traps. But Gerald's years of experience had taught him how to handle such challenges. Inside, the walls were sleek, metallic, and cold, each passageway seeming to twist and turn in unexpected directions. He dodged laser grids, crawled through ventilation shafts, and disarmed energy mines. Each trap was more dangerous than the last, but Gerald pressed on, driven by the image of Zara waiting for him. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the heart of the fortress, the dungeon, where Zara was being held. She was even more beautiful and otherworldly than she had appeared in his dreams, her translucent blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her eyes, filled with a mix of hope and fear, met his, and she smiled weakly as he freed her from her chains. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. Together they made their way back through the fortress, avoiding detection as best they could. The alien warlord soldiers were still on high alert, but Gerald's military instincts and Zara's knowledge of the fortress layout helped them navigate the labyrinth. At last they reached the UFO and escaped the planet, leaving the warlord's forces behind. As they flew through the vast expanse of space, Zara revealed more about herself. She had been a scientist on her homeworld, captured by the alien warlord for her knowledge of advanced technology. Now, thanks to Gerald's bravery and determination, she was free. When they finally returned to Earth, Gerald couldn't believe what had happened. It all felt like a dream, yet here he was, standing next to an alien woman in his workshop, the UFO parked outside. Over time, the bond between them grew stronger. Gerald, who had spent most of his life alone, found himself falling in love with Zara, and she, despite being from another world, felt the same. Together they lived a quiet life, their incredible adventure now a cherished memory. For Gerald, the man who had once only dreamed of UFOs and alien technology, his life had been forever changed not just by the ship he had built, but by the love he had found. This version includes more depth and detail, approaching your requested length. Let me know if you'd like any further revisions. Months had passed since Gerald's daring rescue of Zara, and life on Earth had returned to a semblance of normalcy. The UFO was carefully hidden in an old, abandoned barn on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. Gerald had taken every precaution to ensure no one would stumble upon it. The world wasn't ready for the knowledge of alien technology or Zara, for that matter. But despite the secrecy, Gerald and Zara had grown close, sharing their days and nights together in quiet contentment. Zara was fascinated by human culture. To her, Earth was a primitive but intriguing world, full of contradictions. She marveled at how humans could be so advanced in certain aspects of technology, yet so limited in others. Gerald, on the other hand, found himself more captivated by Zara each day. She was brilliant, compassionate, and full of stories about the cosmos that left him in awe. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Gerald's house, watching the sun set, Zara turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "There's something I need to tell you," she said softly. Gerald glanced at her, sensing the gravity in her tone. "What is it?" Zara hesitated for a moment, then continued. "When I was imprisoned, it wasn't just because of my knowledge of technology. I was working on something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy." Gerald raised an eyebrow. "Go on." I was developing a device and energy core capable of powering entire planets. It's a technology that, if used correctly, could provide limitless energy. But in the wrong hands, it could be turned into a weapon unimaginable destruction. Zara's eyes darkened as she spoke. That's why the warlord captured me. He wanted to force me to complete the project and use it to conquer entire star systems. Gerald felt a knot form in his stomach. And did you finish it? No, Zara shook her head. I destroyed my research before I was captured. But I fear that the warlord may still have some fragments of the work. If he manages to reconstruct the device, it could mean disaster not just for my people but for Earth as well. Gerald leaned back in his chair, processing the information. He had thought their adventure was over, but it seemed there was more at stake than he had realized. Zara's discovery had the potential to change everything, and if the warlord was still out there, they were far from safe. What do we do? Gerald asked after a long pause. We have to go back, Zara replied, her voice steady. We have to find the warlord's base and make sure he can't complete the device. Gerald felt a pang of reluctance. He had just started to enjoy the peace they had found, but he knew she was right. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, and they couldn't hide forever. If they didn't act, the consequences could be catastrophic. The next day, they began preparing for their journey. Gerald had maintained the UFO in top condition, knowing that they might need it again someday. He packed supplies, weapons, and tools while Zara worked on upgrading the ship's systems. Together, they fine-tuned the craft, making it faster and more durable, ready for the mission ahead. As night fell, Gerald stood before the UFO, the same sense of wonder he had felt the first time he saw it still fresh in his mind. He glanced over at Zara, who was adjusting the controls inside the ship. Her presence had changed his life in ways he never could have imagined. Once an old man living in solitude, now he was about to embark on another interstellar adventure with the woman he had come to love. With everything prepared, they boarded the UFO. Zara input the coordinates for the warlord's last known location, an uncharted sector of the galaxy far from Earth. The ship's engines hummed to life, and with a sudden surge of energy they lifted off, leaving the planet's atmosphere behind. The journey through space was long, but uneventful. As they traveled, Zara told Gerald more about her home world, her people, and the technological marvels that existed across the galaxy. Gerald listened intently, his mind racing with thoughts of the vastness of the universe. He had spent his entire life grounded on Earth, and now he was hurtling through the stars with an alien woman by his side. After several days, they finally reached their destination, a remote star system on the edge of known space. The warlord's base was located on a small, barren moon orbiting a gas giant. The planet's swirling clouds cast a faint, eerie glow over the desolate landscape, and the warlord's fortress loomed in the distance, a massive, fortified structure bristling with weaponry. "We're here," Zara said, her voice filled with determination. Gerald nodded. "What's the plan?" "We need to disable the fortress's defenses first," Zara explained. "Once we're inside, we can search for any remnants of my research and destroy them before the warlord has a chance to complete the device." Gerald's military instincts kicked in. He had spent years infiltrating enemy bases during his time in the service, and this felt like a mission he was born for. Together, they landed the UFO in a concealed spot near the fortress and set out on foot. The warlord's soldiers were everywhere, tall, armored aliens with menacing weapons. But Gerald and Zara moved stealthily, using the shadows to their advantage. With his experience and her advanced technology, they were able to bypass security systems and disable key defense points. As they ventured deeper into the fortress, the tension mounted. The corridors were dark and labyrinthine, much like the prison where Gerald had rescued Zara months ago. But this time, they were not simply escaping, they were hunting for something far more dangerous. Eventually, they reached the warlord's inner sanctum. The room was vast, with a towering control console at its center. And there, standing before it, was the warlord himself. He was even more imposing than Gerald had imagined, tall, broad-shouldered, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. "So you've returned," the warlord said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Did you really think you could stop me?" Zara stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "I destroyed the research once, and I'll do it again. You will not use my technology to destroy innocent lives." The warlord chuckled darkly. "You're too late. The device is nearly complete. Soon I will wield the power of Athasan suns, and no one, not even your pathetic human, will stand in my way." Gerald's hand tightened around his weapon. He had faced countless enemies in his lifetime, But this was different. The warlord was no ordinary foe, he was a force of nature, driven by ambition and cruelty. But Gerald had something the warlord didn't, Zara, and the knowledge that they were fighting for something far greater than themselves. Without warning, the warlord lunged at them, his enormous frame moving with terrifying speed. Gerald fired his weapon, but the warlord deflected the shots with ease. Zara activated a force field, protecting them from the warlord's attacks, but it was clear that they were outmatched in brute strength. "We need to destroy the core," Zara shouted over the din of battle. "It's the only way to stop him." Gerald nodded, quickly scanning the room. At the far end, he spotted a large cylindrical device glowing with an intense pulsating light. That had to be the energy core. If they could destroy it, they could stop the warlord's plans once and for all. But the warlord wasn't about to let them get close. With a roar of fury, he charged again, knocking Gerald to the ground. Zara fought back with everything she had, using her advanced technology to create barriers and distractions. But the warlord was relentless. As Gerald struggled to his feet, a plan began to form in his mind. He was no match for the warlord in a direct fight, but there was another way. Using his military training, he quickly scanned the room for weaknesses. The fortress was built with advanced technology, but even the most complex systems had vulnerabilities. "Zara, keep him distracted," Gerald shouted as he sprinted toward the control console. Zara nodded, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts at the warlord. Gerald reached the console and quickly began overriding the system. His fingers flew across the controls, inputting codes and rerouting power. The warlord, sensing what was happening, turned his attention to Gerald, but Zara blocked his path, buying Gerald the precious seconds he needed. With a final keystroke, Gerald activated the self-destruct sequence for the energy core. Alarms blared, and the room was bathed in red light as the core began to destabilize. "It's over," Gerald shouted, backing away from the console. The warlord's eyes widened in a rage. "No, you will not defeat me." But it was too late. The core exploded in a blinding flash of light, consuming the warlord and its energy. The fortress shook violently as the explosion ripped through the structure, and Gerald and Zara barely had time to escape before the entire building collapsed around them. Outside, they stumbled into the open air, gasping for breath as the fortress crumbled behind them. The warlord was gone, and with him, the threat of the energy device. As they stood there watching the fortress burn, Gerald turned to Zara with a weary smile. "We did it." Zara smiled back, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Yes, we did. Thanks to you." They returned to the UFO, exhausted but victorious. The journey back to Earth was quiet, both of them reflecting on the battle they had just fought. They had saved not only themselves but countless lives across the galaxy. When they finally arrived back home, Gerald looked around at the familiar surroundings of his workshop, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. The warlord was defeated, the galaxy was safe, and Zara was by his side. As the days turned into weeks, Gerald and Zara settled back into their quiet life together, knowing that their adventure had brought them closer in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. Stars still called to them, and perhaps one day they would answer again. But for now, they were content in the knowledge that they had faced the greatest of challenges and emerged stronger together. And so the mechanic and the alien woman, who had once only been a dream, lived their lives in quiet harmony, bound by love and the extraordinary journey they had shared across the cosmos. The story now stretches across multiple plot points with deepened character development, more action, and a grander conclusion. Let me know if you'd like any additional details. Years had passed since the destruction of the warlord's fortress, and Gerald's life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. The UFO, now safely hidden away, was only occasionally used for short journeys across the galaxy, but most of their adventures were behind them. Gerald and Zara had made a home on Earth, living quietly in the countryside, away from prying eyes and the troubles of the universe. The bond between them had deepened into something profound. What had started as a strange series of dreams had blossomed into a love that transcended worlds. Gerald, once a lonely old man tinkering in his workshop, now found joy in the simple moments he shared with Zara, whether it was her fascination with Earth's customs or the quiet evenings they spent under the stars, lost in conversation. But as the years went by, something began to change. Gerald felt it first in his bones, an aching weariness that he couldn't shake. He was getting older, and no matter how much love and happiness filled his life, time was catching up to him. He had lived a long life filled with adventure, love, and memories that spanned both Earth and the stars. But the time for his body to rest was approaching. Zara noticed it too. Though her people aged far more slowly than humans, she understood the fragility of human life. She had watched Gerald grow older, his once strong frame now slower, his hands a little more tremulous when he worked on his machines. She loved him deeply, but with each passing day she knew that her time with him was slipping away. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set, Zara gently took Gerald's hand. "I've been thinking," she said softly, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and love, "about what comes next." Gerald smiled weakly. He knew what she meant. "I've been thinking about it too." Zara's large, luminous eyes gazed into his. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. Gerald squeezed her hand, his rough, weathered fingers tracing over hers. "We knew this day would come," he said, his voice calm. "But we've had a good life, Zara. I never imagined, in a million years, that I'd experience all this, that I'd meet someone like you, or travel the stars." Tears welled up in Zara's eyes, but she held them back. She didn't want to cry, not yet. There was still time. "There is something," she began hesitantly, "something I haven't told you. My people, we have the technology to extend life. It's not without risks, but we can slow aging, heal, even rejuvenate. I could save you." Gerald listened quietly, a warmth spreading through him at the offer, but he shook his head. "Zara, I've lived my life. And I've loved every minute of it with you, but I'm not afraid of what's coming. This is the way of things." Zara's grip tightened, as if holding on to him harder could somehow stop the inevitable. "But I don't want you to go. I can't imagine this world without you." Gerald smiled, a soft, gentle smile. "You won't be without me, not really. I'll always be here," he said, placing her hand over his heart. "And you'll have all the memories we've made together. You'll live on, and you'll do great things." "I know it." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to deep blue, the first stars appearing one by one. Gerald felt at peace. His life, once filled with so much solitude, had become extraordinary. He had built a UFO, traveled the galaxy, defeated an alien warlord, and most importantly, he had found love. As the night grew darker, Zara finally spoke again. "Can I ask you for one last adventure?" Her voice was soft, almost pleading. Gerald turned to her, curious. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to take you to my home planet," she said. "There's a place, a beautiful place, high in the mountains, where the skies are always clear and the stars shine brighter than anywhere in the galaxy. I want you to see it. I want us to be there together just once." Gerald's heart swelled with love for her. How could I say no to that? The very next day they prepared for their final journey together. Gerald, though slower than he once was, still had enough strength for one last adventure. Zara readied the UFO, making sure everything was in place for the trip to her homeworld. They packed lightly just a few mementos, some supplies, and a blanket for when they reached the mountaintop. When the ship was ready, they set off, the familiar hum of the UFO's engines filling the air. As they ascended into space, Gerald felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He wasn't afraid of what was coming. He felt ready, at peace. Zara, seated beside him, took his hand, and together they flew through the stars one last time. After several hours of travel, they reached Zara's home planet. It was a stunning world, full of vibrant colors and lush landscapes. Mountains rose high into the sky, their peaks capped with snow that glittered under the light of the twin suns. The air was crisp and clean, and the sky stretched endlessly above them, filled with constellations unfamiliar to Gerald's earthbound eyes. Zara guided the ship to a landing spot near the top of one of the tallest mountains. They disembarked, and hand in hand they walked to a clearing that overlooked the vast expanse of the planet below. The view took Gerald's breath away. The stars were indeed brighter here, twinkling like diamonds against the velvet sky. The air was still, and the only sound was the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves of the nearby trees. They spread out the blanket and lay down together, staring up at the infinite sky above. "This is beautiful," Gerald whispered. "I'm glad we came." Zara leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart aching with love and sorrow. "I am too," she replied softly. "I wanted you to see this, to know that wherever you go next, you'll always be a part of this universe." They lay there for hours, watching the stars move across the sky, talking about everything and nothing. And though their time together had come to an end, their love would remain eternal, like the stars that shone above them. And with that, Zara rose, looking out at the endless horizon. The universe was vast, filled with infinite possibilities. And somewhere, beyond the stars, Gerald's spirit would forever be a part of it. The journey had ended, but the story of their love would live on, timeless, unbroken, and as vast as the cosmos itself.